We're trying to take a test. So we want to keep it down, and we might as well go ahead and get started because we've got covered tonight. So we'll just go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting tonight. We will introduce ourselves, and we'll start right here with Kent.
Kent, K4HKE. Doug, W4STH.
Stacy, W1LLO.
Stephen, KG4JWU.
Harold, N4HER.
Dave, N2AWE.
Keith, KA4JAH.
Phil, KU4GP.
I'm Doc, WB4, Disciple of Christ. Chris, KW4BK.
Marcus, N4MFJ.
Bill, W4EXT.
Dan, W0RO.
Jane, W4MFG.
Gary, WA4BMC.
Jerry, K4GW.
David, KC4X.
Steve, K2MLN.
David, N5WNB.
Ken, K2KXK.
Jim, KV4SJ.
Steve, wannabe.
All right.
George, N4ROT. Steve, WA3RTC.
Don, WS4NC.
Terry,
Jeff, AC4YF.
Your turn.
Jerry, W3NTS.
Harlan, W1HRC.
Bob, W3ABB.
Ron, W4UDB. Jim, KJ4FIN.
Wayne, KK4ZHL.
Doug, KJ4IGP.
Bobby, AA9AU, All-American, and 10 user.
Michael, K4OLD.
Okay, and I forgot to, yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, just for checking in. My name's Nick, KN4UOL.
Okay,
First time here.
good.
Take it back and
Welcome.
And I forgot to introduce myself. My name's Sam Poindexter, NI4TG. I've got just a couple of announcements to begin with. We've got some nice pastry up here, and Steve wants everybody to dig in so he doesn't have to take that home with him. I wanted to thank everybody who participated in Tour to Tanglewood. You guys should really be proud of yourselves. That was a great event. It's very worthwhile, and you should be very proud. I wanted to announce we've got a lot going on tonight, and I would have had some discussion about the 90th anniversary. The meeting's going to go long, and so I've got the coffee can out here and some note 3x5 note papers. Got pens, so if you got any ideas, any good ideas regarding our 90th anniversary next year, things you want to do, just jot down those suggestions and put them in the coffee can. Also, if you've got any other suggestions, you can just write them down and put them in the coffee can. I want to remind everyone that the December meeting will be the Christmas dinner at Mi Pueblo Restaurant on South Stratford Road. That'll be December the 9th. I believe that's the second Monday, and it'll be at 6:30 p.m. Wanted to handle the 2020 officers, so I'll ask Don Edwards to come up, who is the chairman of the committee to select officers for 2020.
Okay, let me have just a second here. The nominating committee was Harold, N4HER, Mike, K4OLD, Jim, W4UX, Dale, KB9SZL, Bob, WA3ABB, and Mary, KM4WPO. She's not here, no. Terry Brown, AK4D, who's not here. Always keep $4. I like that call. And me. And we had approached the current officers. They all agreed to serve next year. They've done a nice job. We're proud of them. I will open the floor for any nominations from the floor for the bylaws. Don't hear any. What I'd like to do is entertain a motion that we accept. Acclamation, okay.
Second.
Marlon and Jim, first and second. And I heard, and Gene over there, a third or first?
Yep.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have officers next year. Our condolences. I want to, while I have the floor, so I can get back to the back room. George Lamb, thank you very much. The Lamb family brought, if you read the newsletter last month about Bob Reagan and World War II, this was a BC 348 receiver.
Wow.
This is what was in the B-17s. They were also in use in Piedmont Airlines and other planes up through the 70s. And this was Bob's personal BC 348. They were made up through Series Q into the 70s. Just as a side issue, I had one that was absolutely mint and gorgeous, and it was double boxed and sold on eBay and went to Sweden. And when I say it's built like a tank, these actually were used in tanks. You know, the post office crushed them. And they pay, and the insurance paid the next day. So, anyway, that's good. Also, while I have your attention, CQ Worldwide is the last weekend or next to the last weekend this month. We are going to run the station. We're going to do our best. I may have personal conflicts, and Henry may have personal conflicts. Have to talk about Mason, KM4SII. At field day, I don't think his butt got out of the chair.
It did once.
If it did, I didn't see it. He said that, and he's wanting to operate. So we do need a few people. We're probably going to have to set up times. If I can, I will be here, and I'll definitely see the building gets open unless I have to be out of town, which is a possibility, and we'll work something out. If you're interested in working, and Henry, being the bundle of energy that he is, when I met him as a young ham after he graduated from Wake Forest, he goes, "You know about this contesting thing? Oh, we got to do that." I said, "I don't think you're ever going to win one of these."
Right.
I did not understand how hard he can crack a whip. His ARRL DX, there are people that literally write a multi-million-dollar check to build a station for this and have people come from all over. What's his name up in Jim? That's one, yeah.
Lima Papa Lima.
Lima Papa Lima, that's one. And we came in fourth in the U.S. in our highest score. Wow. That just blows me away. That was Henry. He came in first in the world in ARRL. It's hanging in the shack, his award in there. We're going to try and be here. We can take this seriously, but we're going to try and have fun. So if you want to operate, it's a great opportunity. We've got a great station, and please sign up, and I'll be in contact and get a list around if you want to participate. Shall I introduce? No, wait, okay. All right, pass that around. Be aware going out the parking lot. We have had a little trouble outside the building. Don't want to scare anybody, but just be aware as you go out tonight and the next few times.
Hey, thank you, Don. I neglected to mention too that we've got old copies of QST and CQ magazine over here. If anybody wants them, new hams, so you want these, just take them home. Just grab whichever one you want and take them home. Okay, we're going to have Kent, our treasurer, to give us a report on our recent Ham Fest and also our financial situation. Kent.
Okay, current bank balance, $2,747.20 as of this afternoon. That does include the money that we took in at the Ham Fest. Specifically, the Ham Fest admissions, the revenue on that was $715. We took in from tables and tailgaters $180, $45 in food donations for a total of $940. Our expenses are really minimal. That donation that we gave to the church, $150. Food was $51.31, which actually is kind of divided up between the night's meeting and the Hamfest boats. So it's, the number is really physically a little bit less than that. But we netted $738.69, which is a little more than what we have been doing the last couple. It appears the attendance was just a tad higher than what it has been the last couple. I don't, Stacy, did you count tickets?
122.
Okay, because, and this usually happens, that 122, that if you take 715, divide that by $5 a piece, that comes out to 143. There's some people just don't turn their tickets in, so there's usually a little bit of a discrepancy on that. But it looks like the move to October may have been a good move for us. Does anybody have any questions?
No, just a comment. I showed up not real early, but I wasn't that late. And I was totally surprised at the number of people were there, considering a short period of time that we've been able to get out the word that we were gonna be having it in October. If it becomes a regular, I'm sure it's gonna get quite a bit larger.
Yeah. And that could cause us problems when we're down the road, but that'd be a nice problem to have.
We'll worry about
Okay.
that when we get there.
That's right. Thank you, Kent. Yeah, regarding the Hamfest, I thought that the execution was perfect. The setup on Friday, the load in, I thought everything was went perfect. The vendors were good. We had a lot of tailgaters. I think we had 20 tailgaters. We had good vendor participation, and I thought the attendance was probably down a little bit, or but you know, if we outdid our January event, then that's good.
Yeah, we usually take in somewhere 600, 650 is what we kind of averaged the last couple of the events.
Okay. Harlan, you want to give us an Aries Oxcom report?
Again, thanks everybody for coming out for Tour of Tanglewood and participated. We had 37 hams, not only from our organization, but we had some from Guilford, we had some from Raleigh, and some that came up from Charlotte as well. So it made the event very successful. Just about 1,200 bike riders for the weekend, and they brought in, as of 6:30 Sunday, the numbers were about $802,000 in donations. They still have the rest of this month to collect, so they anticipate total for Tanglewood should be somewhere around 810. That's about 400,000, it's about 4,000 more than what they did last year. So that's really good, and it's because of you guys. Everybody out there performed excellently. The information I got back from law enforcement was they appreciated the heads up. The SAGs were way more mobile, way more visible. Thank you guys for doing that. Next thing is the end of this month, October 26th. This room, 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 in the afternoon, is basic emergency communications training. All-day course. If you don't want to take the all-day course here, and you still want to take it, you can take the online ARRL 9-week course. Your choice. If you want that 9-week course in a classroom setting, I can do that as well. And that'll be 2 weekends. Total of 3 days.
Please repeat the date, sorry.
Hmm?
Please repeat the date.
26th of October. On the 16th of November, same place, same time, meaning right here, we have the EOC, Emergency Operations Center Net Controller course. That's an all-day course that qualifies you to walk in to an Emergency Operations Center or a forward command post and operate as a net controller from there.
What was that name? November what?
November 16th. 26th of this month, 16th of November. Okay. The last thing I have, and I'm not going to get into detail, I'm first going to see how many people are interested. The Department of Defense is wanting to have amateur operators work with the Mars folks and doing some things later this month and into next year on a trial basis. Basically, the bottom line is what they're wanting you to do is download some of their software, minus the encryption capability, and utilize that software to listen to a broadcast that they will put out over WWV, WWH, or VH. And once you get that, it'll tell you what to do, and then you will coordinate and communicate with a Mars station in the state. I'm one of those. Everybody familiar with what Mars is? Military affiliated radio. You'll communicate with them and you will pass your information to them, probably using that same digital software. It'll be done on an HF amateur band. And then, or if we can't do it that way, we'll do it by VHF or UHF in voice. And then we'll consolidate that, encrypt it, and send it back to the DoD. So they're kind of looking for folks that want to do that. The challenge is that it takes a little bit of time to set this software up. It's not as user-friendly as some of the amateur software is. It takes a little bit of tweaking to make it work right. And we'd be happy to do that and help you with it, but it is a challenge. So out of those that are here tonight, anybody interested in that before I start putting a lot of information out? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, 6, right. I'll start getting that information together. We'll get it up on the website, on the club's website, W4NC, so you can pull it down and get it. Mind you that that software will not permit you to get on any DoD frequency and intercept any of their transmissions, because that stuff's encrypted and you will not have the encryption capabilities. So it won't do anything more than what your MT63 or other digital modes do on amateur radio, but will allow you to communicate with us using that protocol in a non-encrypted manner. And we'll do that on amateur frequencies. All right, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Harl. Okay, Dale is not finished yet, so we'll move into the next topic. We're talking about making money on the Ham Fest. There's 3 ways that the club can take in money. One of them is donations. One is fundraising, which our fundraising is the 2 Ham Fest that we have. And the other is the membership dues. The Board of Directors is responsible for determining the membership dues each year. And this past meeting in September, the board discussed the dues. It's interesting to note that our records don't go back far enough, but we can tell for sure that we have not increased dues in 15 years. But at the same time, expenses have increased. And a couple of examples of that are the repeater on Sartown Mountain. We cannot, because of insurance reasons, we cannot send David Ramsey up that tower. We have to have professionally bonded people to climb that tower for us. That's an expense we didn't used to have. We've also bought some equipment for Aries Oxcom. We've got a new Go box. We're going to buy another dual band fusion transceiver to have in the shack here. And by the way, the Aries group is nationally recognized, and so the money that we put into that is worthwhile. And you know, if we have the right hurricane and we have to go down to the sheriff's department and set up a communication center, you know, this is important, and that equipment has to work. David Shove, he's a senior citizen. He's paying $1 a month in dues. That's right. Okay.
Well, actually, Sam, last year, and I think Stacy will vouch for this, I paid my dues and told her to keep the change.
Right, that was a
$25 bucks.
David's paying $1 a month, and the board would like to increase that to $1.25. In other words, senior citizens and students would pay $15 instead of $12. Also, Stacy, for example, is paying $2 a month in dues, and the board has voted to now have Stacy pay $2.50 per month. So the board has already passed this, but I wanted to bring it before the group. Hams pride themselves on accomplishing a lot with a very little, but we want to be a strong club. We're celebrating a 90th anniversary. We want to be strong in the next decade, and so I need your opinion on this. Doc Holliday, what say you?
I make the motion, we do it.
Okay, I just want to know how, I want everybody to get behind it. I don't want to, for the board.
I think it's still way too low.
Yeah, well, I agree with you.
I'm sorry I missed the board meeting because I
Yeah.
made the point.
Well, we discussed it at length, but that's what we came up with, 15.
Sam,
Yes,
I belong to another club and I pay $100 a year.
right. Right.
It's more than 4 times less. So I think this is a cheap,
Right.
it's really cheap.
I agree.
No, inexpensive, Doc, inexpensive, not cheap. We're not cheap.
No, it's cheap, it's not inexpensive.
Okay, so is this something that we can all get behind? I would point out that the board agreed, if you pay next year's dues prior to December 31st, you can pay at the old rate. Also, I wanted to bring up that thanks to Kent, we can now pay our dues online. Or if you want to do a donation, we have PayPal on the website, and Jim needs to double check that because Terry is gone on vacation and is going to have some more chemotherapy. Terry was going to put a little pixel at the bottom for us to identify, but at any rate, you're going to be able to pay your dues online through PayPal, and that will be hooked up soon if it's not. Harry.
What's the email address attached to the account?
treasurer@w4nc.com.
Okay.
May I throw one thing in?
Yes.
1930, the dues were $10 a year.
Oh,
That's
wow.
$200 in today's money.
Wow. That's interesting. So that's great. The board thanks you for your support. Dale is still not available to give us a testing report, so Harold, the floor is yours. I'm afraid that Harold is going to plug all this stuff in and trip a breaker, so if the lights go out,
Everybody get their phones
somebody
ready.
find the breaker fountain.
There is going to be a drawing for prizes at the end. The prize is going to be this little soldering iron, a piece of plywood, the little solvent brushes that sit there. The rest of it comes back to me. If you want one of these, take a ticket. If you don't, pass the roll on. We'll start it with Harlan as soon as he gets off of his phone.
How much on the ticket?
One ticket.
Huh? Yeah, leave the,
Leave it on?
well, it's going in a coffee can. But you can leave it on there and I'll throw them all in a coffee can. Pardon?
What's the ticket amount?
$12 for you.
Oh, nothing. Oh, nothing.
Take two.
Wow.
Come on, be fair, guys.
And that might be a good idea as a fundraiser for the,
Yes.
you feel free to throw $1 in with your ticket.
Give me a chance to get on. We'll put them all up, don't?
I know, I
Yeah,
get
or
it.
pass the can with it then. Did it? Technical difficulties. Coming up, coming up, coming up. I may sit down while I'm talking. I'm getting old and tired. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah. Get here so it hits me right in the eye. All right. Okay, what we're going to talk about is just basic soldering. Enough to get you so you could solder two wires together and maybe burn up a circuit board. Most of these classes that I've ever seen take a week. We're going to try and shove it in 30 minutes. So it's going to go quickly. Anyway, the first thing that I want to emphasize when we start talking about soldering is safety. Irons get hot. They get hot enough, they can start fires and cause serious burns. So be careful. Your work surface needs to be protected. You don't want to destroy a piece of furniture like your kitchen table that I managed to do one year.
I know my other half, I don't want to do that.
The other thing is eye protection. I wear glasses, so I don't normally put on a pair of safety glasses. For people that don't wear glasses, if you want safety glasses, when we start doing some of the practical stuff here, I have safety glasses here that you can use. If you work in a tight space, I would suggest an exhaust fan, something just to pull the fumes away from you. Doesn't have to be anything real strong. I have a little, on the table over here are just other items that I have laid out so you can see some of the collection of what I have. But anyway, basically, start with your general tools. Long nose pliers, cutters, heat sinks. Heat is your friend and your enemy when you're soldering. You need heat to get the solder to flow, but too much heat burns up stuff around it or melts plastic, insulation on the wires. Special tools, wire holders, something to hold the wires while you're soldering on it. A component vise. I've got some sorted things laid out here so you get an idea of what's available, and maybe a circuit board holder. There's a couple circuit board holders up here on the desk. This is just a selection of, assorted hand tools. I'll get over here and run back and forth, but you can see wire strippers, cutters, some little special tools like this guy, which allows you to pick at a wire to get it loose from a terminal lug. The hemostats are great for heat sinks. This is just an old-fashioned toothbrush type brush. This one is a stainless steel brush. Great for cleaning up joints. Doesn't leave a lot of residue behind or anything like that. If you want one of those, the welding store is the place to go to get them. Special tools. Again, the wire holders, that's what this is. Got a couple of alligator clips so you can hold a piece of wire. A clamp-on vise that'll fit on the table. It's got a swivel head. This is another vise with a couple rubber pads that move in and out so you can clamp objects. Another vise that goes with this, a wire holder, the PC circuit board, and the exhaust fan. That's a low velocity 12-volt fan. So it doesn't make a lot of noise, will just pull the fumes away from you. Heat source. We're going to get our heat from a soldering iron or a soldering gun. The iron's what we normally use if we're going to be sitting down, soldering a lot of connections and what have you. The gun is more of, you pull the trigger, it gets hot, you can solder, put it away. It heats up quickly, and it cools off a little slower. But anyway, that iron size is expressed in wattage. These little irons that are on the table are 40-watt irons. There's some bigger ones up here. They go all the way up to the big iron that's over there is a 250-watt iron. If you get above that, you got solder type. Most common is 60-40. This is becoming more common as 63-37. It has the lowest melting point with that alloy combination. Flux, rosin flux, you can get solder with flux in it. You can use separate flux, either paste or liquid. If you're going to get much hotter than that, you're going to have to go to something like a gas torch. If you're going to do copper pipe, a gas torch. You can get a little propane torch, it'll solder copper pipe. Some of the bigger pipe or thicker pipe, you may need to go to a matte gas. It gets a little hotter, and if you're going to do something like silver solder, you need acetylene. It has to really get hot. Solder type, just based on what you're going to solder, rosin core, 60-40 or 63-37 is preferred. Flux type, anything except an acid-base flux. Don't want to use acid-base flux on electrical connections. Again, the temperature of the irons depends on how the iron's made. If it's a temperature controlled, it should stay pretty much constant temperature for what it's set for. You've got some that are adjustable, some that are just a fixed temperature, and others that get hot, just as hot as it's going to get, because it has no temperature control in it. You know, if it's based on, say, a 40-watt iron, it'll heat up so it produces 40 watts, and that's as hot or as cool as it's ever going to be. These little irons right here are not temperature controlled. They're 40-watt irons. They get about 800 degrees when I measured the temperature on them. The solder, again, this little chart shows you the phases of solder. Below 183 degrees Celsius or 361 degrees Fahrenheit, it's solid. At that point out there with that 63-37 mixture, it will go liquid at 183 degrees Celsius. In these other mixtures, it's in a, kind of like a lava. It's a plastic phase. And the reason that you want to use this is when you take your iron away, it instantly goes back to a solid. If you use one of these other mixtures, it's in that plastic stage, and if you bump it, you've got a bad solder joint. You know, if you move it, you got to let it sit there while it goes back to a solid. So you select your iron on what you want to do, and if you get a temperature control, great. If you're going on economics, you get something that will do the job. This is a 40-watt, which is that one. This is a 60-watt, which is a Weller that's was made in the 60s, because I brought it home with me from the 60s. This little guy right here is temperature controlled. I had it when I put it on the thermometer, and it'll be a slide in one of the next slides. It's about 600. It had a 700 degree tip in it, and it read about 692. So it's very comfortable. This guy right here is a 100-watt iron. It got up to almost 1,200 degrees. It is no temperature controlled. It just gets hot. This is a little 40-watt. Pako iron, it's variable temperature. It's pretty close to what it says on the dial, except I had not calibrated it. It was about 200 degrees lower. But what I had done is I had found out where it soldered the best on the dial. That's where I left it. The Weller iron is sitting over here. It's again a 40-watt iron, pretty close, maybe 30 degrees off from what it says on the dial. That soldering gun, to me personally, that's the best soldering gun that I've ever used. It's a wall. It's 150 degrees, 400 degrees. You know, you pull the trigger, it gets 100 degrees, you pull it all the way back and it's 400 degrees.
Watts.
And it does good on heavy duty stuff. The little thing on the end, that is a resistive soldering iron. 2 tips pass current through like a pin in a connector or something like that. So the heat is right there. There's also a resistive soldering iron over here on the table. Moving on up to,
How about the big one in the top left?
oh, you mean the American Beauty?
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot that one. That's 250 watts. And that is the Cadillac of soldering irons. American Beauty's been around a good while, and they are quite proud of their product.
Mine still works.
Pardon?
Mine still works, and I got it in 1950.
One we use the phone company, stay plugged up all the time.
Yeah.
Use the wrong wire. Never turn them on.
Again, here is something using gas. Little benzene torch. That's over there. The propane, the matte gas, and the acetylene. Silver solder, welding store, you can get that. That's not that expensive if you've got some of the connections. I was looking into making a magnetic loop out of copper pipe, and it recommended silver soldering the joints. So, okay, setting up the work area. Now I've set these up, but basically select an area with good light. You want to be able to see what you're doing. If you work in an area, if your work area is a piece of household furniture, put something on it to protect it. Even to the point that you may want to put down a tarp to protect carpet or flooring.
Sawdust splatter does wonderful
Yes.
on the floor.
The next couple I'm just going to flash through. I set up mine was just a folding table. Nice picture of the top of the table. I put down a little piece of non-slip matting. Put the piece of plywood on it. Set the soldering equipment in place. Put the little exhaust fan in. The tools. Holding device so I could hold whatever I'm working. And last of all, safety glasses. If you've not worked around molten lead, you have to be very careful about keeping things dry. You get any water in that molten lead, it will instantly turn to steam and it will explode that lead all over the place. I learned that helping my father plumbing. I thought it was great the way the ladle sizzled when I got it wet, you know, and then I stuck it back in the lead pot and the next thing I knew, it came. He said, "You wet the ladle, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah." That's why I was pouring out my little blocks of lead that were supposedly little blocks of gold. Soldering iron, this is talking about keeping the tip clean. It's very important to get a good solder joint. It transfers the heat well when it's clean. Most modern soldering irons have ironclad tips, so you don't have a lot of oxidation to the tip. The older copper-tipped soldering irons, they would oxidize away. You'd have to keep filing them, keep them in good shape. To clean your tip, use a brass wool pad. Brass will effectively remove the dirt and trash from it without affecting the iron temperature. There is a thing about if you use a wet sponge, you get that shock of cooling the tip off and then heating back up. These little soldering stations have the sponge. I still use it, just depending on which iron I'm using. But for the most part, I have the little brass pad over there. For the guys that were at the Ham Fest, I noticed that Jerry bought one of the little brass pads from AC/DC. Yeah, they're not very expensive. If you want to give money to the club, go to Amazon and buy it and put down the charity organization as a club. After cleaning the tip, get in the habit of wetting the tip or putting solder on it. That prevents it from oxidizing, and it helps transfer the heat when you put it against the contact. If the tip becomes oxidized, flush it several times with rosin core solder. Put it on there, clean it, put it on there, clean it. On the brass pad, another thing you can do is you can take a polyester rag. These little rags laying on the table are pure cotton, lint-free rags, and you can brush the tip. Do it with a dry rag, not with a wet rag. You won't hold on to the wet rag very long because the heat will come through. These are good for cleaning it. I used to, when I was in the service, we wore blouse boots. I'd clean it on the edge of my fatigue pants.
Where do you get these?
Say again?
Where do you get these red?
The cloths.
The cloth.
They came home with me when the company closed down.
Oh, so you have
They're tech wipes.
You have a supply.
Tech wipes. I've got a box of them over there. You can look at the label. Let's see. Rosin should remove the contamination. There are some tip cleaners. Weller makes some that will help restore the tip and clean it off real good. Again, all of this stuff I'm talking about is available through Amazon. We're still cleaning the soldering iron or the joint, cleaning the solder joint. Again, if you're using new components and stuff, usually it's clean enough and the flux will clean it, and so the solder flows well. For things that's weathered or something, you may need to brighten the surface, use a wire brush, sandpaper, emery cloth. If it's got grease or something like that, alcohol, some kind of solvent will clean it off. Usually just alcohol does a good job. For components, weathered, clean it. Other things that can be used, I've got like a hard scraper. You can scrape it with a knife, things like that. Wire brush. Read that and heed. Do not use steel wool. What happens is the steel wool gets embedded in the joint. It will rust. It will cause problems. And if the little particles fall off on the whatever you're working in, it will cause shorts. And it only takes one to kill your project. Good joint connection starts with good mechanical connection. You wrap the wire around a terminal. You see these pictures. I've seen some things on Facebook where a guy's soldering a wire. He's there dabbing it with a soldering iron and just barely touching it. Well, it may work for a while, but it's not going to work constantly. Wires, twist them together. If you're doing a wire to a terminal, make sure you wrap it around a terminal so it's a good mechanical connection before you put the solder to it. Applying flux. If you're using a liquid flux, you can just put a little drop on there. If you're using a paste, a little dab. When you apply the heat, it will flow over the joint. It'll melt and flow over the joint. liquid, paste flux. I've got both liquid and paste flux up here. You want to play with it when we start soldering some of this. You want to apply the broadest part of the tip to your joint, if you can, that you can. In other words, you don't want just a little small area touching it. You put a broader part to the tip to the joint, so the heat will transfer quickly. Tending the tip just before applying it to the solder joint will help that heat transfer. It's like, you know, if you're trying to get something and you're doing dry surface to dry surface, it doesn't transfer real well, but if you've got that liquid solder on the tip, that helps it transfer. Apply slight pressure. Push the iron against the tip. Put some pressure on it so it's making good contact. Let the connection heat up before you apply the solder. Don't stick it on there and start trying to shove the solder in. More than likely what you're going to do is push the solder against the iron and it'll just melt and drop off.
Harold, tending to be sure. So your soldering tips should always look like they've got solder coating them?
Yes.
All the time?
Yeah. If it's temperature controlled, it will stay that way. If that 100-watt iron over there, it burns the solder off and turns it a blue. It just really gets too hot. Now, something like that 100-watt iron, down at the end, there's a variac down there. I keep mine plugged into a variac and turn the temperature back. Turn the voltage back so the temperature comes down in a usable range. And remember, we only have to get up to 300, a little above 361 degrees. So if you're around 400, 450, 500, depending on the mass of what you're soldering to, as to how quick it'll draw the heat out of the iron, and the iron will cool off. That's the idea behind the bigger irons. You got more heat there, more metal to hold the heat and transfer it to the joint. The bigger the iron.
But not necessarily the hottest iron is not always the best for the job.
No.
That's a good point to remember.
Yeah, you get your iron based on what you're going to do. You wouldn't want to take a big 100-watt iron and go into a circuit board that's got wires that, etchings on it, they're a few thousand thick. You know, I can't even see those. Okay, you want to, in this case, the connection must get hot enough to melt the solder. It is not the iron that you want to melt the solder, but what you're soldering. You get that hot enough so the solder will melt. You get a good joint. It's forming an alloy through the heating of the joint and applying the solder. You want to apply the solder to the connection, not the tip. Now, I may touch the tip with the solder, but that's to get that solder to cover the joint so it transfers the heat. Apply just enough solder to cover the connection. Too much solder can cause problems by shorting to other components. One of the little videos, you'll see that I get a blob of solder on it because I put a little too much on it, and I went back and cleaned that off. And some of these videos in here, like this one, I'm going to solder two wires together. And I try to speed it up so you don't have to watch me do the mechanics. But basically, I'm twisting the two wires together. Trim off the tag ends. And then I get out my little wire holding device. You can see my bench is not very neat. And for those of you that have been around and seen it, you understand.
This was about 2 o'clock in the morning, wasn't it?
No, this wasn't that late. But now, see, that's the little wire holder. I have the wire held out there, and I brought over the little brass thing to clean the tip with. There was a little jump in there. That's because I went and focused the the microscope on it so that you'll see the solder joint. Now, basically, see, I'm tinning the tip. And now, because of the shakes, but you see, I've got the iron underneath it. I'm letting it get hot. I put the solder down, and that's the flux that's melting. You see, I went to both ends of the connection, and that was a little blob, and I started to go back and get it thin, but I went and cleaned the iron, and then cleaned it off. And so
Part of the solder.
it's in the solder. Now, this is the magnified version.
That's cool. That's good.
I'm sorry about the shakes, but see how it flows across the, that's because the wire's hot enough to melt the solder. There's my little blob,
Yeah.
and I came back and put the iron on it and cleaned it off. And it's nice and shiny. That's a sign of a good solder joint.
Good deal. Yeah.
After you get done, you want to inspect it. You know, look for that shiny connection. If it's matted, it's a good chance it moved and you got a bad joint there. It'll give you problems down the road. You've heard people talk about, well, I had this problem that was intermittent, and they come back and it turned out to be a cold solder joint. It makes connection for a while, and then it doesn't make connection, does make connection. A good solder joint should have a bright, shiny appearance. A matted appearance could indicate a cold solder joint. Cleaning the joint, I didn't clean the joint that I made on that. It was just two wires I was trying to get together. Now, if it was important, I would go back with something like alcohol, Freon, or a solder flux remover and clean the joint. Now, up to this point, we've talked about soldering wires together. Well, most of the stuff you're not going to be, you may be building new circuits, but there's a good chance you're going to be trying to repair one, which means you've got to unsolder. Unsoldering is a whole nother class. But I'm going to jump in here and show you some basic tools. This is a solder sucker. It's a little tool that has a spring in it. You load it. When you release it, it creates a vacuum and will suck the solder off. These two little spools down here are solder wick. They're a treated, braided piece of braid that you kind of fan out. You put down on the joint, put the solder on it, let it melt the solder, and that wick will suck the solder up. It will flow up into the wick and take the solder away. Works quite well, especially on circuit boards. I use this most of the time. Now, I have all the toys, guys, so I have a vacuum solder sucker designed to remove components off a circuit board, so, you know.
I got this toolkit that came with a so-called solder sucker. I'm afraid to use it because it's made out of plastic. It doesn't make any sense.
The tip on this is made out of Teflon. So it's laying over here. You can inspect it. It's blunted up a little bit, but you just replace the tips. You buy the tips. So you're not going to destroy it by using it. Now this one here is, I'm going to unsolder this. I'm right-handed, so I'm trying to cut the wire with my left hand and not doing too good at it. But what I'm doing is I'm going in, and where the wire is wrapped around the terminal, I'm cutting it in half. So when I put heat on it, I don't have to unbend all of it. It falls off in two pieces.
The sucker's in your left hand.
Yeah, that was the solder sucker that took away most of the solder. Now I'm going back in and cutting the wire again because I didn't get all the way through it. It was covered with solder and I couldn't get the pliers in there. The other thing that I would recommend is a pair of these little flush cutters that will cut flush to the wire or board. They're $4 or $5 for a pair. And you can get them down at again, Amazon, or you can go down to electronic distributors and buy them locally. Deborah, AC/DC, had them out there on her table. Now, this is the close-up again.
What are you using for this close-up?
For the
What
what?
kind of microscope are you using? Oh, that one. Oh.
Yeah, well, not. This is the old one. Don has it now. That's the new one.
It's well done. That's good.
Now, I'm coming in behind it with a soldering iron, and the tip looks terrible. But you saw the solder melt, and then the solder sucker removed most of it. Now I can get in with the pliers and cut that wire a little better. And then I go back in from this side and see the wires moving. Of course, I didn't reach in and grab it with my fingers. Again, it's hot. That's now the wire is loose from the terminal. And see, the terminal's clean. I can put wires back on it. So that's basically, the steps to unsolder. All right, now, like I said, unsoldering and soldering, these classes usually run minimum 2 days. I think Don told me he went to a class. They used to teach a class in 1 day that Pace, one of the major soldering appliance manufacturers, had a week-long class. So they teach it and give you a chance to practice it. So that's basically soldering a wire together or unsoldering something. Now, the one that we do the most of, and a lot of people want to be able to do it, is install our own antenna connectors on a cable. So we're going to go through putting a PL259 connector on a piece of RG8 cable. The first thing I want you to do when you get ready to do it, come on, there we go, is I want you to go online and get a data sheet on a PL259 connector. It will tell you how to prepare the cable for that connector. Amphenol is one of the better names. So, it tells you these dimensions, and the one that I pulled this off of had a list of different cables. So it told you how to do it.
The ethanol is not for the solderer, but.
Yeah. So anyway, it shows you how to trim it. It tells you the step, like put on your sleeve, then put your connector on. After you get this trimmed back like this, and then, after you get it on, you solder it together and then slide the sleeve on. If you forget to put this sleeve on and you're on the last connector, just get out your cutters and start over. Where did I hide all my toys? No. That's a piece of cable trimmed back, to these dimensions. There are some sheets up here that look like this, about 10 or 12 of them. But up here in the top, up here so Don can see us, it shows you the dimensions. Now, if you're going to do one, use a ruler and do this. If you're going to do them, or every now and then, what you need to do is take and make you a little template. So you can just lay this on there. I've got these marked off with a magic marker so that I can lay it on the cable and then make the cuts in the cable and do it. Now I'll show you how I cheat in a minute. But basically, you make you a little template like this. And you see, this is the end of the wire here. This little line is the first joint. The next one is the little wire that's cut back. And then the last one is the insulation that moves and keeps the braid. So you just lay it up there and it's already marked out for you. take a piece of tablet backing, a little stiff cardboard, and you make your connection out of it. That's simple enough to do. Once you do it, you use a sharp knife or something like that to cut it back so that it moves back. Now this little bit of the inner insulator sticking out, you want to make sure you cut those wires back so they're flush back in there. It only takes one of those to short that connector, and the cure for it is to cut it off and start over. Slide the coupling ring on first. Don't forget that. I've done it. You know, where's the ring? Oh, there. Cut it off. Screw the plug assembly. There's a whole bunch of connectors over here. The inside of that thing is threaded, so it screws up on that cable, up on the insulation and the shield as you screw it on. After you get it screwed on, and if you cut it according to the chart, when you get it screwed on far enough, that inner conductor will be even with the end of the tip of the connector. That way you know you've gone far enough. Now, I'm making up a cable. I hope I keep it in the thing. See my little gauge down here? Got it laid out. I use a bypass cutter to cut the cable. And you see how it flattened the cable out? I like to go back and kind of try to round it out. It's not going to hurt it if you don't, because you're going to cut the end of it off. Yeah, I laid it up so it's on there. Now, that little blip in there is that carabiner was in the way. So I took it off. Now what I've done is marked it where that shield is cut back. And I'm trying to cut through it with this thing, which is just a common case cutter, razor blade knife. I'm trying to get it cut through that. Now, if I was doing a whole lot of this, I'd make a tool to do that with. Something that just hold that razor blade and I can spin it around the connector. And you see it didn't cut through it, so now I'm taking the flush cutters and trying to cut everything back. And where I was reaching across, I'm trying to find a pair of scissors in the tool caddy that's sitting off screen. Yeah, I finally found them, but those are little cuticle cutters. But they cut through that stuff real well. Now, the next thing that I do, well, get rid of all the end pieces. And I come back out, and now I want to make the cut and cut off the center insulation. You notice it's a little bit past where I was cutting. And I cut it until it gets to the center conductor. And then as I pulled that off, it straightened some of those wires out, and I had to cut a few more. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is to mark the jacket so I expose the braid. And in this case, I just want to cut through the jacket and not the braid. And you notice I bend it over a little bit. Once you bend it over, did you see the jacket, the inner conductor? Yeah, see, there's the cable.
Notice it's much easier to turn the cable when it's only 6 inches long.
Yeah. Well, you watch what I do. Now, see, I put the sleeve on, and now here goes the conductor. The connector. And now once it gets to that jacket, it gets hard to turn. So I got a pair of pliers and held on to it. And like Ken says, it's easier to turn the cable. Now, what I pointed to was the center conductor was out even with the end of the connector. And there it is, ready to go. Now, if you do a lot of them, you might want to buy some special tools. This is from DX Engineering. If the cable is exactly for what they made that for, it would have cleaned that center conductor off. So what I do is just pop it off like that, go back in because, oh, my phone's ringing, and I gotta go answer. I thought my wife was going to answer it, but she didn't. Anyway, that when the center conductor hits the stop in the back, it's trimmed it down far enough. So, you know, I pull that little bit of insulation off, go in. Now that's all prepared. Turn it around and go in the other end. You know, now they're proud of those special tools like that. Now I start to screw the connector on. Remember how I got the pliers and did the first one? Well, you see that little... You know, and I twisted it because the wire wasn't there all the way, you know, turned it down a little harder. It's out there where it needs to be. There's holes around that connector to solder the shield to the connector. So, you know, after I got done with this point, I would go over and now do the soldering. You know, sit down, put it in something like this little vise that's up here on the table, and take it.
Mike, you want to check for shorts with an ohmmeter first, please?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Mightn't you want to check for a short with an ohmmeter before you solder?
That would be a good idea. You test as much as you want to fix. Thank you for that lead in the next slide. You see here I've got it on the center conductor end to end, and I've checked it for shorts. If I'd checked it for shorts, the meter would still be over here to the left, you know, is a good sign. But I have just an old analog meter with a needle that swings to check for shorts and continuity. If you've got a long cable and you really want to do a good test and you have an SWR meter, put your dummy load on the end of it, look it on the SWR meter, it should read 1 to 1 and 50 ohms. And you can go through the frequency range to see if it's frequency sensitive.
That's a good suggestion to check the continuity and shorts before you solder.
It's been good, and yeah. But like I say, when you screw that on, that makes a connection on the shield. That little extra bit that's on the this is okay. This is the microscope. Come on. Did it come up? Damn. Well, everything works until you need it. I'm done with the PowerPoint, so I'll kill it. Anyway, what I'm trying to show you is this little bit of insulation sticking out past the shield. That keeps the wires from going down on the center conductor. That's why they show it doing it like that. When you screw it down, again, when this comes even with the tip of the connector, you've got it far enough because those dimensions that are on the chart match these. And this is like 5/8 of an inch, a 1/16 of an inch, and then I think 5/8 of an inch in there. So it's not hard to do. Again, you're working with sharp instruments, hot irons, be careful. Questions?
I noticed when I screw the connector on, sometimes there's more braid around one hole and almost no braid on another hole. I just make sure I solder all the holes.
Well, I mean, you're trying to make a connection between the outside of the connector and the shield, and it would be nice if it would stay in there like that, but it's friction and it's going to turn. The other thing that you can do, this is the most common connection, is the crimp-on connectors. Again, you've got to invest money into crimpers and stuff like that. You had a question, Bobby?
I did. The problem I've run into on one of the on occasions, I say, is I go measure all the things correctly, and then I go to screw it on, and then the wire or the braiding or the insulation compresses asymmetrically. So I end up with that 1/16 of an inch margin is taken away as the center insulator moves in or the braid pulls out.
Yep.
Any solution to that other than
Well,
starting over again?
what I do is, of course, if I'm using the tools, I go with that. But if you're stripping the center conductor back by hand, it can be longer because you can always cut it off.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah.
It's usually been the braiding that was the concern.
But now, see this little space right here that looks so nice and neat? If I push real hard, it'll go away.
Yeah, that's right, that's the
Yeah, I mean, it pulled out when I did it, so I just left it. But
how do you solve that when you start to screw on?
now, what we've got over here is we've got these set up, plug in the irons. I've got little brass pads up here so you can play with that. Yes?
I know I'm not getting this started, but did you mention solid doesn't last forever? Last forever. Can you
He's saying that solder doesn't last forever.
Like how?
Storage wise?
Rosin core.
I tell you, I ran into that this week. My solder was bad. I don't know what I did wrong with it. I can't find it. All of the junk on the desk. I cleaned one out of the drawer. And it was bad.
I'm still using solder, and this solder right here that we're using tonight was made in the 70s. If it's, pardon?
It's not rosin before, right?
Yes, it is.
It is?
Yes, this is,
Well, I've had a lot of problems with the age of the solder.
yeah. If you're buying,
It can oxidize if it's poorly stored, and it will be a problem to use.
yeah.
And if it's around a bad environment, I don't know.
This is leaded solder. If you're using lead-free solder, you're going to need another class to solder with that. Lead-free solder creates a whole new set of soldering conditions. I'm old school. This is what I learned with. This is what I use. Yeah. Yeah.
Another thing too on the coax connectors, you go to the ham fest, there's 10 people there selling connectors in bags, 10 for so much. They're not all equal because a lot of them you'll get and you'll have to trim off some of the center conductor to go through because the holes are
Too
all
small.
different sizes. So you better make sure which one you buy when you buy it.
Also have to watch for the connector itself. If you buy a cheap connector, that's what you got. The center on some of these new connectors is made out of polypropylene. Propylene or whatever, but it melts.
It melts.
Teflon.
Silver Teflon.
Teflon.
Yeah, you may have to shop around until you find a source of good connectors, and then keep going back to that.
Not all coax is coax.
Yeah. Yes.
Harold, I think Bobby was asking a question that I've had a problem with in the past. And that is, you go to screwing that thing on, and it looks like the insulation gets fatter instead of letting you screw it on there. So I put just a little dab of what bulb grease was it, and it keeps corrosion out of your light bulbs in your car.
Yeah.
And it just screws right on there, no problem.
Or no ox.
Or no ox, or
No ox.
something
Yeah.
like that.
There is some silicon designed for connector joints.
Sealer too, is it hardened?
Pardon?
Is it hardened? So it's
No,
not
it doesn't. Where's Terry? Terry, what did you use on the antenna?
The ox guard to clean it and grease it.
Yeah, because we both got the same antenna, and that has been out and installed, and it's a second-hand antenna, and it oxidized, and now when we try to put it up again, we run into problems. And what we found out through a little bit of research is to go out and clean all the joints and put silicone on it so we have a good connection again. And the silicone would facilitate the greasing it and also preventing it from oxidizing.
Yeah, but it's not the silicone if you normally would.
Yeah, this is for electrical connection.
Dielectric.
Yeah, dielectric grease available through Amazon.
No oxygen, same thing, no oxygen.
Yes, sir.
You can get it at AutoZone.
Yeah. I'm lazy. I just think about something. I run over to internet and search for it, find out what it's called, and then I go and say, where do I buy it? And Amazon pops up, and free shipping through Prime, and the club gets a share of it. So anyway, what we've got set up, go ahead, Bobby.
About a month ago, I found out at Lowe's here in Winston, they had a nice kit, 2 of them actually, with those cutter tools, and inexpensive. I think it was $8 a piece for 2 of the cutters and strippers, and 1 for a combined, 16 for a combined unit. So they weren't that expensive.
Yeah, well, DX Engineering, where I got mine from, like I said, they're very proud of their tools. So if you find a better deal, great. Write it down so we know where to go.
Were they for our size cable, like RG213?
Was
Because most of that stuff at
RG6?
Lowe's is for telephone stuff.
This was for the cable TV, so it was
Yeah.
RG6, RG8, I think.
6 and 59.
Probably wrong size.
This stuff.
But anyway, soldering station set up here if you want to practice the wire. Over there behind Sam, there's a box of connectors. Now those are used connectors that I have stripped the cable out of so you can practice with them. And there's a cable over there on that milk crate.
At one point in time, I thought I heard them suggest using flux for cleaning. Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So something really dirty. You take some of that suck paste and paint it on and then wipe it all up?
Yeah, well, what I usually do is I'll take and touch my tip into the soldering paste. You know, it creates a little puddle, and then I'll clean the tip off on the sponge or the pad, and so that way the tip stays clean. It melts the paste a little bit, so now I can drop a little dab of the paste on the joint that I'm going to solder.
Harold, excuse me, would you mind if
Not at all.
Dale took 3 minutes for a testing report?
Yep.
Because when we start this soldering, we're going to lose control of the crowd.
Yeah, anyway, we will, I will get the tickets and see who is the proud owner of these new soldering stations. And after Dale does a report, have fun trying, guys. There's plenty of people here that help you burn yourself.
While Dale is walking up, I want to remind everybody the business meeting is a week from tonight at 66 Pizza. We meet at 6 or 6:30. We eat a meal together, then we have our business meeting. Also, we've got some name badges. If these people are here tonight, KN4LKO, W4DCS, KW4UD, and KW4UC.
Don said I better stand over here where you get blind. Well, good evening, everybody. I just want to give you a short brief on the test. We had a lot of success tonight. We had 2 sessions. We had nine tests that went through. Of that, we've had, see if my math is right, we had 3 that failed. That left us with 6. 2 passed general and 4 new technicians.
one of the generals actually passed his tech and general the same night. Speaking of which, any of those folks in this?
Gerald is back here.
Gerald's back. Yeah, I thought my eyes aren't that good. Stand up, and we'll embarrass you and say congratulations, Gerald. And for the VEs that were there, once again, I think we outnumbered, or maybe had just a stand up. Henry, Mike, raise your hand if it's too hard to stand up. And, let's see, who else? John Kippy. Some of them already left, but again, without. Oh, myself? Yeah, I was there too. So, without them, we wouldn't have this program, folks. And then I'll go briefly over the repeaters. Thanks to David, we had an executive-driven truck going up to the Saratown Mountain, Thursday? Seems like 2 weeks ago. But anyway, we got up there, got another link receiver going, and it tested well at home, but somebody was in a rush and stayed up early at 2 in the morning, and they forgot to take the pull-down resistor. So next week, I'll take the pull-down resistor, and hopefully that link will work. We also worked with the internet provider, put another router up there, because the other router wasn't working well. And it looks like most, but not all, the ports are open. So we'll do some tests on that. I'll put another server in there and make sure we can talk, and I'll give us some more options. That's on 4.7. 6.4 and the 440 machine, we still need to do some work. How many of you use the Fusion on 6.4?
I have to drive over that side of town.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
but I did it a couple times.
so it works, but the range is limited, right?
Yeah. Part of that's big.
We're still having a pager issue up there. Pager issue is still hitting us. That's 30 over 9 on the UHF input, so that repeater's not even up until we can do a brute force filter. Gene was kind enough to get a cavity to see if we can find out what that frequency is, and with Harrow's spectrum analyzer, and try to zero in on that. Same with 6.4. Echolink was resolved, right, Ken, for iPhone, so that's working. The Echolink's at my house, and it works on 147.315, Jerry's repeater. Where'd Jerry go? Oh, he's back over there. So thanks, Jerry. That's used for the Vagabond net and some other areas. We'll eventually put that back on 4.7 or build another Echolink node. The one back here that goes to 6.4 is not working because we have some internet challenges with ports here. So we'll take care of that in our spare time. Any questions? Okay, thank you, folks. Good job.
Yeah. One of the things that you might want to do, let me find a, I hate PCs.
Oh, if it didn't give us trouble,
This little piece of wire right here has a couple of crimp connectors soldered on it at the end. If you want to make some of those, they're the hairpins for the little tape measure antennas we made. I need some hairpins. Again, cable and connectors over there, we'll move it over on the table. Whatever you want to try to do, please do it. And while we're doing that, we'll draw the tickets and see who gets to take the soldering irons home. There's a plastic box that's against the wall behind each iron. The box goes with it. You can tie a ribbon on it when you get home.
Great.
All right, thank
Oh, one other thing, guys. I told you I had all the toys. Those tools that came from DX Engineering are in here if you want to try them. So, here's the cutters for the cable. You gonna take a set of tickets? That was no good. Yeah, go ahead. I don't think it. Anybody want to put a ticket in here?